So it's been over 2 years since my last Espa video? 6 years on this channel? Oh boy, I didn't realize it's been quite that long. I'm terribly sorry. Alright, but jokes aside, I wanted to make sort of an update video on where the Espa project is at and where it's heading. If you're a bit of an OG on this channel, you'll remember Espa as my planet in the CWP before becoming its own standalone project later during 2020. It was this Espa that I made videos about on my second channel, YG Worldcraft. Okay, so why is this here then? I didn't even know you had 2 channels. Running 2 channels on YouTube for me in 2024 is really, well, not doable. So I'm going to backtrack on all of that and move that content over here. Really, until I had made the heart map video, I hadn't made any videos anywhere in like 2 years, but I do still like that process. It's very motivating to me to get out a video showcasing what I've been up to, and even though I haven't made a video on Espa for 2 years now, I've definitely not been idle on it. So then, where is Espa going? Chances are you're only learning about Espa for the first time in this video, so maybe a short recap is in order for most of you. Because before you can ask where Espa is going, you need to understand where it's at now, and to understand that, you have to know where Espa has been first. So this is going to be sort of a history video on my own project, I suppose? For better or for worse, I'm an obsessive record keeper for all things I do, Espa included. So I don't know if this is going to rip away some of the magic for you, but I think it's interesting to talk about. Now, I think I came up with Espa somewhere in the summer of 2013. Even though I have no materials anymore from back then, I know I started in 2013 because I recorded it in 2017. Probably when I still had those materials. This version of the project likely consisted out of some incoherent sketches in my school notebooks. I don't have these anymore, since it was very long ago, like 11 years ago by now. So I'm also not entirely sure what inspired me and such. If I had to guess, it would be many things. I had world building projects even older than this, but those weren't Espa. I was still very young, but I think the initial drive to make Espa was to expand the scope of those other projects. But really I was only 13 at the time, so this was even before I ever made my first comparison video. So I don't remember the details that clearly anymore, sadly. So by 2014 I am now in my second year of middle school, and turns out one of my classmates was into world building also. Way more than I was at that time, as a matter of fact. So that inspired me to push harder with Espa and flesh it out. This version of Espa was located in an alternate universe called Versa Proxima, which was the closest multiverse to ours? Yeah, I'm not sure how those physics would check out, but 14-year-old GG loved it. All that survives from this period is a Word document, which has some edited maps from atlasoftheuniverse.com. God, that takes me back. There's also this edited Wikipedia info box about the solar system in there. But yeah, this version was still far from deep. Now, by November 2014, I discovered this at the time hip space simulator called Celestia. Now, let me know if you guys want me to do a video on the history of Celestia, because I think it has a very interesting story, but that's beyond the scope of this video for now. Basically around this time, I discovered the Celestia motherlode, and oh god, this brings me back. Back in my days, before we had fancy space engine, we used Celestia as our space simulator, and the Celestia motherlode was where you would get add-ons for the program. Look, I was 14 at the time and this was the most epic thing in the world for me, okay? Besides size comparisons, of course. One add-on in particular which I loved was the add-on for Romulus from Star Trek by Yester. I remember modding the code for that when I was 14 to get the first version of Espa. Actually, looking back on this add-on, Romulus had a green atmosphere and purple me distribution, which is a concept that survives all the way to the modern version of Espa. This is also when I used the first map of Espa as a texture for the planet. Cool. Sadly though, I would end up refitting the original files later, so this version has been mostly lost to time. except for the Axel Alpha Wikia, which is somehow still around. I wrote this about 10 years ago. The fact it's even still around is I suppose a testament to how anything you put online stays around. It does have the updates for the 2016 refit, but using the view history you could probably still recreate this early version of Espa. This way I was able to find out, for example, that Espa's sun used to be an orange dwarf star, something I would later change to a yellow dwarf. But other than that, there isn't much else on the Wikia. It's a nice record though. Technically this was an open and collaborative project, but this was well before Discord existed, so yeah, I don't think I ever reached anyone with this. Now I mostly didn't do anything with the Celestia Espa mod for 2 years, let alone publish it. Instead, this was the time I would be making comparisons on this channel. Until in late 2016, I got back into it. I'm not sure why. I think at the time I got inspired by Artifaction's new videos on planetary science. These were still sorta new at the time, so I felt like changing a lot of the parameters to make them more realistic and obey, you know, actual mathematics and physics. As I explained earlier, I applied this refit over the original Celestia files, which is why what I still have on my PC is from this version, which is still 7 years old really, so that's amazing. Oh, and this is also when Espa got its name. Before 2016 I used the name Oberon, which I changed of course because that's an actual celestial object and a moon of Uranus. 2016 Espa was very much improved on 2014 Espa, but as for the project scope it was still mostly just a fictional star system, and some incoherent maps. That said, this time I was making efforts to push deeper. These efforts would eventually manifest in... On the 24th of February 2017, I upload my first voiced video, which you can still watch on my channel today, after you've finished watching this one of course. This video was the announcement of the CWP, or Collaborative Worldbuilding Project. I remember starting this because I wanted to work on worldbuilding with other people. Espa before this had always been a collaborative project in spirit, but never in practice, and my hope was to use the reach given to me by my comparisons to introduce and share people to this amazing hobby I knew and loved. I had also just discovered the then brand new space engine program, which allowed me to model the Espan system so much better than Celestia ever did. Back then, Espa had a forum on alternatehistory.com, as this was before Discord was really well established, and it was the method of project work I was most familiar with. To assist, a CWP Wikia was created on the 7th of April 2017. This Wikia is also still around today and counts almost 700 pages, not just of my works on Espa, but also from other people's worlds. It's a really interesting thing to browse even still today. There's a lot of cool work on there, not only by me, but also by other people on there. So on the 12th of May 2017 I finally made a Discord for the CWP, because at this point it was getting more active, so it would really help to have the organization of a server over that of a forum. Now that sounds great, and it was, but at the time I did not have a Discord server for my YouTube channel. So what happened was that a lot of fans showed up there who had no interest in world building at all, and the thing hopelessly spiraled off topic. So that server got removed, then we moved back to the forum, then the project kinda died, so I made a proper Discord server for my YouTube channel in April 2018, then hosted the project on there for a while, before finally moving it to the second CWP Discord in October 2018. This was a pretty chaotic time, I will admit, and I will make no excuses. I was totally inexperienced with organizing something of this scope, so there was a lot of trial and error involved before I managed to get the right working environment for this kind of collab project, in the form of our second Discord, which is still around today. I'll drop a link in the description, though it's not as active as it used to be. From 2018 towards 2020, I made huge progress on the project within the CWP mainly, writing out the timeline of the nations and wars on the planet. I wrote about 3,000 years of lore from Stone Age to Space Age, and made some very, bad attempts at Spec Evo. It was really fun though, and I got a lot of depth added to this project that was never there before. I have fond memories of especially this stage of Espa development because I got to work alongside so many talented people in the process. Even though I would not make any videos about this version of Espa, its work is immortalized on the CWP Wikia. I would sadly consider most of this to be decanonized today though, because in September 2020 I took Espa out of the CWP. This was not an easy decision for me, but I felt back then that Espa had matured enough as a project to stand on its own feet. I think back then my exact words were that the CWP was the egg from which modern Espa hatched, and I still agree with that, although I think it slightly undersells the effort and work other people put into the CWP. So Espa became a standalone project at this point, which was no longer collaborative. One of the biggest changes made here is that humans would henceforth populate the world instead of just aliens. I feel like humans make more relatable characters in stories. I mean, that surely is very self-serving coming from a human like me, but it's my world building project. I can do as I like, and I think at this point I had started to care less about hard realism and more about what kind of story I wanted to tell with this world. I moved Espa over to my second channel, YG Worldcraft. And I kept at that for about a year, and there's a lot of good videos on there, which by all intents and purposes are still canon. Of course, again, this version has its own wikia, projectespa.wikia, but it has only about 65 pages, because I stopped using fandom at this point. I'm sure most of you are aware by now, but fandom has really become an increasingly terrible website, unlike what it used to be. So like many others, I have mostly stopped using it in favor for Google Docs, where I manage all my world building now. I think in 2020 I revamped all of the geological features of Espa and made a totally new map, and finally got into, God forbid, speculative evolution, which is something I've dabbled with for the last 2 years now. This sadly hasn't resulted in any new videos, mainly because I really struggled with it. When you come from hard science world building, where you are just used to following mathematical formulas, it's quite an almost culture shock, I would say, pun intended, to suddenly not be able to do that. And I've been at this for 2 years now, and I'm only about at the stage where some of my creatures are just going on land. So that brings us to today, and should tell you where Espa has been and where it's at. Now then, let's finally discuss where Espa is going from today on forward. So what I've always really liked doing, and I think also fits the spirit of this channel going forward, is showcase videos about the stuff I work on. The problem with applying this to Espa is that it's literally never done, and I'm always still changing stuff. It's easy to showcase something you've finished, like the heart map, but it's much more challenging to showcase something you are still actively working on. There's also the idea that someday this project might manifest into a story. I mean, I'm definitely hoping that's the case, and revealing too much about it in detail now might undermine that. That's definitely a concern I have at least, but I think doing this will ultimately help enrich the project rather than spoil it. But just keep in mind that if you are watching this video 3 or 4 decades from now on, there might potentially be major spoilers ahead, so you've been warned. So I think that's what I want to do going forward with Espa, because that's what I like, getting to share it with you guys. And I don't really think making a second channel for the project was really a great decision on my part in that sense, because it limited the reach quite dramatically. Also, in 2024 it's barely doable for me to run one channel, let alone 2, so I'm absolutely going to move Espa content back here going forwards. That said, I don't think these videos are going to be full showcases like what I did before. Espa is always in development, so expect maybe more devlog style videos. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around and subscribe. And I guess for that I will be starting at the beginning again. I ran a poll on my Discord, and it seems the vast majority of people want me to start from the start, rather than pick up where I left off with YG Worldcraft. Which, you know, that's fair and will help establish this as the content here. I wanted to do this video first, talking about the history of the project and maybe a bit of nostalgia sharing, while also maybe serving as a sort of trailer for this series. I know some of the people who helped me with the CWP might still be watching me today. In that case, you're an absolute legend and I love you. But if you are a newer follower of my channel, don't worry. You should be all up to speed with the project history now for when I drop my first Espa video. Hopefully soon? But no promises on that though.